fortunate to have our beloved Kristin, president and all around wonderful person who has stepped in to do tonight's meeting. Um, but before that, I just wanted to outline just a few announcements. Of course, all of our events are on our website, cnpsmarin.org, and you can find them there. We also, for events that you attend, we also have a meetup site. That's the California Native Plant Society Marin Chapter. And all of these wonderful meetings are recorded. Well, most of them are recorded, and they're on our YouTube channel, which is also CNPS Marin. So what's coming up tomorrow night is the penultimate plant keying session at Dominican College. And we are so fortunate to have this opportunity to look at the wonderful plants that we have here. You can bring in leaves and things but there are lots of dandelions and other damn yellow composites blooming that are hard to identify. So this is a great opportunity to bring them in. It's from 6:30 to 8:30. It's just a drop-in session. Just come in your pajamas. Okay. Next month's meeting, I wanted to point out, is all about moths. We have two moth experts who will be talking, and the title of it is Putting on Moth Goggles, a conversation about moths in California's ecosystems. So that will be August 10th. So don't go on vacation. Come and join us then. Okay. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kristin Jakob, and this title of her talk tonight is Serpentine Habitats and Plants in Marin County. And that's one thing that's just so special about Marin is all the serpentine habitats we have. You all probably know Kristin and don't need an introduction, but I will get the introduction read anyway. Kristin has been a member of our chapter since she was 12. She first learned about Marin's flora through chapter field trips, which she enjoyed and was welcome on even as a youngster. Since then, she's served in many capacities as president, program chair. She's been program chair for ages, acting president, plant sales co-chair, many roles that she's taken on. For her personal life, she's been gardening for over 50 years, mainly in Marin County, where she first planted California natives during her early teens. Natives remain a special interest for her alongside other ornamental plants from around the globe. She's worked for Smith & Hawken Nurseries and Green Jeans Garden Supply. She conducts plant consultations and plant selection for residential clients and has volunteered her expertise for several public gardens. Kristin is also an accomplished botanical illustrator, and if you get a chance to go to one of her open houses, please do not miss it. She has published commissions such as the poster Wildflowers of the Sierra Nevada, the Society's set of grass posters / placemats, which I have a copy of, which just great and perfect for identifying grasses. She has illustrated and co-edited the UC Press book, Wild Lilies, Irises, and Grasses, Gardening with California Monocots, and periodically illustrates new species and described that botanists are currently describing for publication in scientific journals. So please welcome Kristin and enjoy tonight's talk.
Thank you so much, Anne. So now let me find the screen share. Get this open. There we go. Okay. So I sort of cobbled this together rather quickly. I had an awful lot of photographs, which I had to dig out by going back years into my records. But I'm also very grateful to Vernon Smith, chapter member and husband of Doreen Smith, our past rare plant chair, who provided a number of the slides, and you'll see his name on those. So I come to this as not an expert, but an aficionado of serpentine habitats, having fallen in love with them in my teens when first exposed to them through chapter field trips. And I couldn't find, but I have a couple of pictures of me as a teenager hanging out at Rock Spring and up in the damp area below Old St. Hilary's Chapel in Tiburon. So you're probably all familiar with the serpentine rocks and soils. This is just a little simplified description of some of the characteristics that serpentine has, and it tends to be inhospitable to quite a number of plants, native and non-native. The open conditions provide a great habitat for many of the native plants, and it tends to support an exceptional number of rare, localized, and exceptionally interesting plants, in my view. So I'm going to start sort of in the eastern part of the county and work around in an arc over Mount Tam and then end up in Mount Burdell. And this is a relatively small preserve that adjoins a larger open space preserve in Tiburon, Old St. Hilary's. And it is one of the few locales of the Tiburon or black jewel flower. This is a dampish area below the chapel that hosts some lovely plants, including leopard lily. And here, thanks to Eva Buxton, is a lovely shot of the Tiburon jewel flower, a form of Streptanthus glandulosus. And this is one of Vernon's beautiful close-ups. Notoriously difficult to photograph this plant, and it has its good years and bad years, and the chapter has been involved in some efforts to protect it in the Middle Ridge Preserve, which is also on Tiburon Peninsula, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. Allium lacunosum is a beautiful little bulbous plant that blooms in abundance here at Old St. Hilary's and also on Ring Mountain. This is the Middle Ridge Preserve, relatively small. It sort of crests the ridge line and can be accessed from a couple of streets, including Avenida Miraflores, up from Tiburon Boulevard. And at the very top, there's sort of a level area that retains some moisture a little longer into the spring than other sites, and it's host to great displays of goldfields and purple owl's clover. And on the lower slopes down to the south is where the Tiburon jewel flower is found. And that's where we have in the past hired people, skilled people, adventuresome people to weed on a very precipitous slope. So we hope the effort hasn't been in vain. We monitor that every year with the help of Eva Buxton, who's been a resident of Tiburon Peninsula for a long time and keeps an eye on that species in particular. So this is looking west towards Mount Tam. And one of the other rare plants that grows there is the Tiburon paintbrush, relatively diminutive species, pretty localized, and has a CNPS rare plant listing. And this is one of Vernon's photographs. And here's a map showing Ring Mountain Preserve and a couple of other adjoining open spaces. And I'm partial to approaching it from the top of westward, which is shown right here at the top, middle top, off of Paradise Drive. And that brings you up. You miss some of the weedier lower patches of the preserve on the north side, and it gets you right up onto the Phyllis Elman Trail, which is where the Tiburon Mariposa lily is seen to great advantage. My little arrow here. So here's Ring Mountain, looking again towards Mount Tamalpais. Early spring shot, probably March or early April. An example of the colors of serpentine. And this is a great wide swale that starts at the Phyllis Elman Trail and fans out and is host to some of the moisture-loving species on the serpentine there. A lot of caryxes and the Phyllis Elman Trail itself, where amongst the rock outcroppings you can find the Tiburon Mariposa lily, which is actually fairly widespread at the top of the mountain, but this trail provides one of the best places to see it up close. And my less than adequate shot, but I wanted to show one picture that displays the whole habit of the plant and the solitary basal leaf, which is relatively glossy. And they have elongated upright seed capsules when they mature. And they start blooming around late May. Every year it's a little bit different, and they're pretty much finished by mid-June. And here's a beautiful close-up by Vernon. There are, each flower, I mean, each individual plant has a little different patterning and coloration. And there are a couple of examples where their anthocyanin pigment is absent. So they look albino, but they're just all sort of chartreuse colored with no maroon markings at all. And the related Oakland star tulip, another rare species, quite abundant up there in March primarily. Small flowers about an inch and a half across. Again, coloration markings vary plant to plant, but they're generally this very pale mauve or lilac color in small clusters. And another rare plant up there is the Marin dwarf flax. It's found in a couple of counties right around the San Francisco Bay. And here's one to give you a sense of the scale. About half-inch wide blossoms from pink buds, opening to very, very pale pink, almost white. And also rare, but not with any status, is the serpentine monardella, which is found in various serpentine outcrops in Marin, but is fairly widespread outside of Marin. And then up to Mount Tam, this is on the way up to the very top, right below the road. There's a very nice exposure of serpentine that has a number of rare plants in it, but it was pointed out to me just this year, so I haven't followed it much, but the serpentine is weathered to this wonderful rust color, and where it's chipped off and exposed, you can see the more typical raw serpentine colorations. And then down again towards the Mountain Theater, this is a rare little fern called Carlotta Hall's lace fern, and it's closely related to Aspedotus densa, which has a slightly less less finely divided frond. And then Rock Spring, large areas of serpentine in and around here. This is in the main upper meadow by the big intersection with a extensive parking lot. And if you just go a little bit north into one of the side meadows, there's some great exposures of serpentine with interesting plants. And then back above the intersection on the west side, there's a wonderful serpentine barren, and the cobweb thistles display really nicely around here. They're not restricted to serpentine, but in Marin, they're very often associated with it. And this is looking south towards San Francisco. Here's a close-up of the thistle, which can be in prime bloom at really odd times of the year. I've been up there in February and seen it in full bloom, and June. It's quite interesting. And the color of that plant varies. There are a couple of species that I'm not confident about identifying, but it can be quite red, not just that raspberry color. And this is the wonderful large barren, so-called barren of serpentine right there at the intersection. And on it, you'll find drifts of this little annual Douglas's stitchwort, lovely with little half-inch flowers, and the rare Mount Tamalpais jewel flower. This is a small example, but it was one of the clearer shots I had. The rosettes can be much more distinct, and the plants can get up to a foot or more tall with a couple of side branches. And they're always this lovely sort of plum purple color. And glandulosus itself, so that's the same species that the Tiburon jewel flower is a form of. And common on a number of the serpentine habitats in Marin and outside of Marin is rosin weed, little annual in the sunflower family. Charming, blooms fairly late, starting in usually May, going on for a couple months in the summer. Very sticky, tacky glands, especially pronounced around the heads of the flowers. And Plantago erecta, which isn't always on serpentine, but usually you'll find it on most serpentine exposures. And I just saw it for the first time off serpentine in Marin at above Abbott's Lagoon. And down in the South Bay, this is a larval host plant for the bay checker spot butterfly, which is endangered. And the California golden banner, large herbaceous perennial in the pea family that usually grows in slightly damp areas. So this is just on the north side of that serpentine barren outcrop. And just a little bit west off of Ridgecrest, you can walk off the road. There are a couple of trails, and there's a wonderful little meadow and rocky outcrop of serpentine just a little bit down over a knoll. And on it, there's a little bit of rare manzanita, lots of Festuca californica here under a big madrone, and more of that Mount Tamalpais jewel flower, amongst other lovely plants. And now moving to the north side of the mountain, this is the looking from the Serpentine Chaparral up on Pine Mountain Fire Road in what's called Carson country. And we're looking north here up to off Serpentine Chaparral and grassland. And further up that road, heading west, there are great expanses of Sargent cypress, which is associated with serpentine in Marin. And here's a close-up of the capsules or cones. And two wonderful rare shrubs often growing together up there. This is Arctostaphylos montana, subspecies montana, and Ceanothus jepsoni. And here's a close-up of the manzanita, which can be quite gray, kind of hoary textured in the foliage, or almost bright green. And the flower color ranges from pink, pale pink to white. And here's a close-up of the Ceanothus, which, unusual for a Ceanothus, has 6 parts to the flower. In general, there'll be exceptions, but one of the distinguishing features, and the small holly-like leaves. And these lomations are common on serpentine almost everywhere, and they can grow off serpentine as well, but I mostly see them on serpentine. It's the woolly fruited lomatium. The flower color can vary, as can the foliage color here. Bright yellow or creamy colored, and they have quite beautiful large seed capsules. I should have included a shot of those, quite beautiful. And then this dainty little Claytonia. This photo makes it look much larger than it is. The flowers are less than ½ inch across, and this usually grows in drifts in open soil, rocky areas. Pretty early spring blooming. And I should have mentioned this was a photograph from Vernon Smith. I have not seen this plant myself. Streptanthus batrachopus, Tamalpais jewel flower, is found up there on the Pine Mountain Fire Road and also a little further west off the San Geronimo Ridge Road. And up in that San Geronimo area, we have the Giacomini Open Space. I've only just begun to explore this. But again, the Arctostaphylos montana, subspecies montana, is quite abundant up there. And avaricias of various species are found in Marin. Skunkweed is the common name for most of them. And they're often in kind of low-lying open areas, often along roads or places where water collects. And so ditches are a good place to look for these. And they're often fairly late blooming, June, July. And then also common along the roads and open areas of serpentine is the Tiburon buckwheat, occurring in a number of serpentine habitats in Marin. Difficult to photograph. I apologize, this one's not very clear, but it gives you a sense of the overall habit of the plant. And then these little round stalked basal leaves. Flower color varies quite a bit. This was a pretty pronounced pink. And a little lower down on the north side of the Giacomini Open Space, which is easily accessed here at the top of East Sylvestris Road. This is the East Sylvestris Fire Road that goes up to the top of the ridge. And so nice outcrop of serpentine here with, interestingly, chaparral P, which I don't usually associate with serpentine, but it's quite showy up here. And again, the Arctostaphylos montana. And Calamagrostis foetidus, which grows in a number of the preserves that I've already shown you, but there's a great drift of it here because the ground had been cleared. You can see the story poles at the top of the ridge. There's going to be a house built up here. I went to a hearing about this development, and the owners claim that they will be good stewards of the land. So I'm hoping that that's the case. But having cut the chaparral, a lot of this Calamagrostis came up, took advantage of the open spaces, and it's quite a large bunch grass, blooming at about 3 to 4 feet typically. And it's considered fairly rare. And again, the rosin weed, there's just a little patch of it there at the bottom of the slope, and this was a way to show you close up how it looks with a little insect visiting. And now heading north and a little bit east, Lucas Valley, crest of Lucas Valley Road. I haven't walked on the north side of the road, but there's a very nice little serpentine outcrop here on the south side. This is in the spring with a great display of leptosiphon, which is not serpentine endemic, but it is really shown to good advantage here. Blennosperma nanum, early spring bloomer, annual, and then this lovely white one-sided jewel flower, Glandulosus subspecies secundus. So this can be found here and in a couple of other serpentine outcrops in this part of the county, and then it's also found a little bit north of us. And here's a thermopsis there near the road, near Lucas Valley Road, growing out of a crack in a huge rock. And thanks to Vernon, I've got some nice shots of Mount Burdell, which is a large serpentine area in Novato. So here's a typical spring display with California poppies and blue dips, I suppose we should call it now, instead of blue dicks, Dipterostemum capitatus. And again, more blue dicks here. I think, yeah, Vernon might have to put in the chat everything we're seeing in this picture, but it's a lovely, lovely spring display. And in a limited area up there, you can see the beautiful fragrant fritillary. These flowers are about 1.5 inches or so across at the opening. Generally just 2 flowers or so per stalk, and a couple of fairly wide basal leaves, and they'll stand about 6 to 8 inches tall, the robust specimens. Lovely plant to look for in March. You can also see it in a couple places out at Point Reyes. And more recently found, with the help of Doreen Smith and Aaron Arthur, this very odd-looking Striptanthus anomalus, which was just recently described. And it has clasping, fairly wide leaves. It's probably, is it Striptanthus orbiculatus? Somebody will have to tell me. There's a species that has this leaf characteristic, but the flowers are quite different. So I have yet to see this one in person. But many years ago up there, I had the pleasure of seeing the bitterroot in flower, which is quite rare in Marin, common elsewhere, and also rare in the wild in Marin, but increasingly planted, of course, is the narrowleaf milkweed. And up on Mount Burdell, that tends to grow in a semi-moist swale or kind of seasonal stream bed. And now there's a quite new preserve that's been added just west of the main part of Mount Burdell, and there's going to be some trail work connecting the two preserves, decommissioning some trails, creating a few more, and there's some lovely, it's a lovely place to walk, and there's some beautiful and a handful of rare plants there as well. So this is looking uphill to the right is a large serpentine exposure, and then straight ahead at the left, upper left of the slide, you're seeing the main part of Mount Burdell, the western end of it. And this this road that we're walking along will be reduced down to a trail, apparently, if their current plans, Marin Open Space, go ahead. So Marin dwarf flax is here. I have not seen it here, and also the Striptanthus anomalus. And I apologize, this photograph is perfectly clear in my photos, but when I copied and pasted it into the show, it persisted fuzzy. But it's the leather oaks up here attain considerable size. There are not a great number of them, but they're quite large for the species. And here's a close-up. So this one is, if not restricted to serpentine, it's strongly associated with that substrate. And the following plants grow, at least in Marin, they're on serpentine in wet areas in a number of locations. So Rhododendron occidentale, a great place to see this is Potrero Meadow, which can be reached from Rock Spring and other parts on just over the north side of Mount Tam. Blooms in May and June, typically very fragrant deciduous shrub. And the leopard lily, you can see this at Bootjack pretty readily, even just looking up from the road as you're driving up just before you get to Bootjack. The serpentine columbine, which unlike the Western columbine, is glandular throughout pretty much. And I guess it's the modified sepals. They tend to, instead of sticking straight out as in the Western columbine, they're kind of flared back. And the petals, those tubular structures, are a little attenuated. They look almost cut off on this species, but it's a very showy plant in pretty sunny, moist serpentine habitats. So this is on the road, the paved road of East Sylvestris, just before you get to the fire road. And also there is this Tamalpais or Vases thistle, which grows in damp serpentine habitats, and it's restricted to Marin. I don't know why this is not a listed species. Maybe that effort is underway, but it's certainly would qualify as having a very limited distribution. And the marsh zigadine, this is a little serpentine outcrop that has a seep running through it, just above Sir Francis Drake in Forest Knolls. And that one-sided white striptanthus also grows up here, along with the Tiburon buckwheat and a couple other fairly rare plants. And the following, not restricted to serpentine, but very often found on it in Marin anyway. Yerba Santa, the Picaringia, Yampas of different kinds. This is the most common, Burdell Mountain, fairly tall, airy. The basal leaves have often shriveled by the time they bloom, usually in areas that retain moisture fairly long into the spring, and they're late spring, early summer bloomers. So right now they're kind of in peak bloom. And then this is just a display up on Ring Mountain, late March, with blue-eyed grass, tidy tips, goldfields, California poppy, and in the upper right, the purple needlegrass. Common yarrow, very common in serpentine grasslands. And in the damp areas, of course, the regular Mimulus guttatus, which is extremely variable. There's some very small forms or subspecies of it. I have not attempted to learn them. This is the more typical, robust, large flowered type. And this is a sort of medium-sized, medium-small form growing at the East Sylvestris Fire Road, bottom of the road. And again, often associated with serpentine, but not restricted to it by any means, are the naked buckwheat. This one at the top, flower color variable in Marin. It's usually sort of a buff, pink tinged, pale tan, cream. In other locations outside of Marin, I've seen it with quite varied colors, often together, yellow, pink, salmon, quite wonderful range of colors. And then the grass, squirrel tail grass, which can be quite showy as the flowers are young. The inflorescences can be very satiny, pinkish purple. And here it's going to seed, and the awns reflex quite sharply and they shatter. But it's a pretty compact bunch grass, up to maybe a foot or so tall. And then at the top of Ring Mountain and in a couple of other locations, we've got the beautiful Indian pink. This one again, copied a bit fuzzy, but you get the idea. And here's the Iris macrosiphon. Easy to tell the straight species anyway in the foliage from Douglasiana. In macrosiphon, the leaves are pretty much the same texture on both sides, kind of matte green. whereas in Douglassiana, they're distinctly glossy on the upper side and more yellowy green matte on the lower surface. And the macrosiphon in its typical form has very little yellow on the falls and is often a rich dark purple and pretty short stalks with a long tube if you tear it apart. And it can hybridize with Douglassiana. I've seen that happen where the two grow together. And Calochortus luteus in Marin typically doesn't have the big dark blotch on the petals, but here and there, like at Roy's Redwoods and up at Rock Spring, I have seen them with the dark blotch, which in Sonoma County, for instance, almost all of them have the dark blotch. And it's a lovely one to see in late spring, early summer. And in wet areas along springs and seeps, the white burdea or wild hyacinth. And in drier habitats, Tritolea laxa, very occasionally it'll be white, but usually it's this lovely blue-purple. And generally a little more reddish purple with a little different structure inside the blossoms, the harvest burdea, which also tends to have fewer flowers per cluster, but they'll often bloom at the same time and together in the late spring, early summer. Allium plectens grows in masses on those serpentine barrens in the main Rock Spring Meadow and in a couple of other locations in Marin. It's also found quite widespread outside of Marin and not restricted to serpentine. And here the leptosiphon up there at the crest of Lucas Valley Road on the Serpentine was spectacular in the spring, and the flower color varied. There's a little bit of this up on Ring Mountain as well. And sky lupin, quite abundant in a range of habitats, grasslands, rocky banks, and it's perfectly happy on serpentine as well, as is the farewell to spring or ruby chalice clarkia, our tallest one, and with a dark base to the petals. And here's a close-up from Ring Mountain. Soap plant, which some years is just magical on Ring Mountain, especially where you see great numbers of them in the grassland. And if you're up there after 4 p.m. when they open, they just sort of appear to float over the grasses. And showy tarweed, also found on serpentine, but not exclusively by any means. And I think that's my last picture. Yes. Okay.
Well, gosh, Kristin, that was a tour of the
A whirlwind
county.
tour. I missed a few places, but I caught all the ones that I thought were readily accessible and showed good examples of plants.
That's great. So, folks, we can allow you to unmute and ask questions. Right now we have just a couple questions. Matthew asked if the abundant grass species on Ring Mountain were natives or Europeans, and Lynn answered him partially by saying that there are both natives and European grasses on Ring Mountain, and that the native perennials are much more dense towards the top part of the mountain, away from where people are living.
Yes, and the serpentine is more exposed and tends to restrict how many species and how large the non-natives get. But there are ryegrass, Italian ryegrass, and and slender wild oats both do a little too well on serpentine. So we have problems with them even in the pretty pure serpentine exposures.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
Yeah,
And
but
then Leah has a question. She says, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but last time I was at Bootjack, I found a couple dozen calypso orchids blooming in one concentrated zone. Are there any serpentine specific orchids that we know of?
not that I know of. So if anyone else knows of any, please chime in. I know Roger's here, famous for his serpentine area up in Sonoma County, the cedars, and I know the the bog orchid up there, um, Epipactis gigantea. There's a lovely purple foliaged and sort of bronzy flowered form that grows at the cedars and has been named serpentine night. Nice little pun. Thank you, Roger. And so it's not a species restricted to serpentine, but that particular color form of it is from serpentine habitat. So yeah, please, anyone else who has anything to offer there, chime in.
Some of the plantanthers, can you hear me?
Yes.
Uh, like in Sonoma County on the cedars, the leptopetala is commonly on serpentine, but it's not. I don't think it's restricted. The stream orchid is very common in seepages. You have it on the Rock Springs
Yeah.
area too, or maybe no, it's that road going over uh, near where you take over Carson Ridge. The creek down on the next curve has it in there and stuff
There
like
is
that.
some a little bit on the Cataract Trail as you go down from the Rock Spring area, before it dips into the solid woods, the big meadow, big open meadow. Just at the bottom of that meadow, there's some near the creek.
Could I ask that Burdell Mountain, the new area, you mentioned there was streptanthus on that view you showed of the old road
Yeah,
going up.
it's sort of behind, if you turn to the right, I haven't seen it there, but I've seen where it is on the map. It's kind of near the edge of the woods, but and a
Oh,
little
okay.
higher up from that lower road. So there's that road winds up, it gets to a fence, a sort of a damp area, loops around and doubles back to the southwest, at a higher level. That part of the road, I think, is going to be decommissioned, at least, and it's sort of down from that upper road that the striptanthus is supposed to be.
Oh, okay.
But we haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. So it's a pretty limited area that's been found in.
Well,
And
there's two sites, right? There's
yeah, and the other side is
the one near that buck aging area.
yes. So the
Yes.
eastern end of Mount Burdell,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, Dick O'Donnell saw it up there. That was the main
Okay.
location on Mount Burdell proper. And so the Bowman Canyon one is is a pretty limited population.
Okay, Paul Barnett notes that calypso orchids and many others are associated with forest mycorrhizal fungi, so they're not necessarily serpentine associated because of that reason.
Right. But in Marin, it just happens that their habitat, there's serpentine underneath most of the areas where I've seen it growing.
Okay, so does anybody else have another question that they'd like to just unmute and ask?
This is Rob. I just wanted to say what a beautiful presentation. And it's so
Yeah.
interesting how many jewel flowers species there are in Marin. because living like in Nevada County, Grass Valley area, there's a lot more serpentine. But and we do have rare jewel flowers, but the diversity in Marin on the coast, it's very interesting. It's super interesting. And we know that the coast has a little less serpentine areas, less percentage. So how dynamic, it's just so dynamic. And we know that the coast and the Sierras at one time were one before the Central Valley, formed. So very interesting presentation, and I really appreciate all the input.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes, there's others. Dana Flowerman says really nice presentation. Thank you. Lynn Lozier says thank you, Kristin. Wonderful presentation.
I want to remind people, this is Nona, that comments are due to Marin County Parks on the proposal for Bowman Canyon this coming Friday at 4 o'clock. I urge you, if you have some concerns, to make them known by reading the initial study, mitigated neg deck, for a kind of a complex of trails that are destined to connect people on foot as well as on bicycles between Bowman Canyon, which has been relatively untouched. Pristine is hardly the word, but relatively untouched compared to the recreation activity on the rest of Mount Burdell. So make your interests known by Friday. Go online, find the project, and you will find a blank that you can fill out with your comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Nona. Yes, one of the slides I showed was a sign that was posted at the bottom of the trail at Bowman Canyon, and that had the information about those plans and the opportunity to comment. So we're working on a comment from the chapter, and a couple of our members are commenting as individuals. And Helen Lindqvist asks where shooting stars are found. Well, there's some up on, that's not restricted to serpentine, but there are some up on Ring Mountain. If you go up there pretty early, you'll see them if you, oh shoot, what's the name of that trail that comes up from the northeast? Anyway, there are quite a few places up on Ring Mountain where you can see them, and also at Rock Spring. Pretty easy to find near the main upper meadow there.
The Big Trees Trail in Indian Tree Open Space also has a lot of shooting stars.
Oh, good. I've never been there actually. That's nice to know. Carolyn Christman asks if I'm planning any plant walks to serpentine areas. Next spring. This spring got a little disrupted for me with a health thing. Let's see. San Mateo. Okay, I think that's it.
Well, great.
Yeah.
Thank you once again for stepping in and with such a wonderful presentation and such gorgeous pictures of yours and Eva's and Vernon's. Thank you,
And
Vernon.
Vernon, especially. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you again. And I've got to go back and add his name on one of those pictures.
And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And once again, check out our other events at cnpsmarin.org and consider coming to the keying session tomorrow at Dominican. Okay, 6:30 to 8:30. There's information on the website. And we've got lots of other field trips happening, although a lot of them are filled up. Lots of people are happy to do it. We also have a lot of stewardship opportunities, and they're filling up also. So great.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Anne. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.